Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode. As you know, the current crisis in Myanmar is extremely concerning, and we appreciate that you're taking the time to stay informed. There is even value in just becoming more aware and helping to inform others. So please consider sharing this episode so that more people may learn about what is happening in the country. It's critical to ensure that this issue remains present in public discourse. But for now, let's get on to the interview itself.
Okay, so today I am speaking with Sai, a sham poet and activist operating largely on Instagram and posting in English. Sai's poems speak to the struggle, strife, determination, and hope of the struggle against the military junta and provide a glimpse into Myanmar for English-speaking audiences. He's been writing poems and posting them to Instagram since shortly after the coup. Sai, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So in our conversation, I'd like to get a sense of your journey, what motivates you, how you see the current situation in Myanmar from your own vantage point, and also how you feel your writing kind of connects to it all. So I was hoping we get started with just your journey. Where'd you grow up? How did you get to where you are now?
Yes. So I'm Sai. I'm 25 years old. And I was born and raised in Yangon. I lived in the city and went to school there until I was maybe 16 or 17. Then I moved to Bangkok, Thailand, to start my college education. And currently I'm based in Taiwan, in Taipei, working as a freelance writer for a private publishing company. So my background, I would say, I grew up in a very traditional, perhaps like conservative family. I'm mostly ethnically Chinese, maybe like with a little bit of Shan from my dad's side. And despite that fact, my family, including myself, didn't really like practice Chinese folk religion. We were devoted Buddhists, Theravada Buddhists, still are, especially my mother. She meditates a lot. She regularly upholds the five precepts, and makes regular donations to the sangha and the underprivileged. So she kind of had a massive influence on my spiritual life as a young kid. Like me and my family would go on pilgrimages every single year to many sacred Buddhist sites, like in Bago, in Sagaing, in Mandalay. So, even though I'm not like ethnically Burma, I still identify as a Myanmar national. Just because of how synonymous state and religion are. And it pains me to see such a beautiful, one-of-kind nation kind of devolve into the state that we see today, once again, because of one delusional man. And that's how poetry came into mind because I've always had a passion for writing, and
Hmm.
I figured, if I were to stay sane in this situation, I might as well write and share my words on Instagram, and hopefully, people who get to see or read my poems feel the same way as I do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned staying sane. Um, the current situation seems a bit insane. So how would you say your poetry helped you to do so? What about writing? What about posting helped you to sort of maintain your center?
Um, I guess writing, you could say it's like a coping mechanism for me in a
Mm,
way. Um, I distinctly remember the moment the news broke. I was in the MRT on the subway here in Taipei, and I couldn't quite process what I was reading.
mm,
Like, I felt an emotion that I truly have never felt before. It was like a mix of just confusion and an anger and frustration. And, honestly, I can no longer keep up with the countless lives the regime has taken away from us.
mm,
It's scary because these tragedies are somehow becoming normalized.
mm,
Like, I'm sure this applies to um, everyone who are Burmese. Like, our feelings and emotions have become so desensitized that,
mm,
like, seeing a dead body on the streets like no longer phases me.
mm,
Like, of course, this is not to say that I'm giving up the fight. Like, I'm giving up
mm,
hope. It's just that it's funny because this is coming from a devoted Buddhist and someone who
mm,
consistently practices meditation.
mm,
So, like, I believe those who practice vipassana, like insight meditation, know that feelings are just feelings, and
mm,
they can't really bother you unless you choose to cling to them.
mm,
And so, in a sense, my practice and everything that's happening in Myanmar are always like clashing, and sometimes it
mm.
gets um, overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's how poetry helps me in a
Mm,
way, like a coping
mm.
mechanism, and like turn something that I love into a place that I could take refuge in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's excellent. Uh, yes, and that makes a ton of sense. I think that like you're saying, that clash, that sort of juxtaposition of your meditation, your sort of spiritual journey, in connection with the sort of atrocities or the horrors that you see on a regular basis through social media or in the news or whatever it might be. Um, Having to make sense of that, having to come to peace with that in some way so that you can move forward, would be a massive challenge. And you found writing to be a way to help you to move yourself through that, to sort of, I would imagine, transform that into something useful. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes, in a way.
Yeah, sure, sure. And so, what motivates you to share your poetry? What motivates you to post it for the world to see?
Um, so, like I previously said, like it serves as a coping mechanism for me, and
Mm,
it's almost like a routine now that I go on Instagram for at least an hour a day
mm,
and just keep myself up to date with the situation in Myanmar.
mm,
And I mean, of course, like 99% of the time, like the news that I see, not it doesn't offer hope in any sense.
mm,
And when I feel like everything, like I feel like this whole process, like I do understand that, of course, this the spring revolution, it takes time for change to happen, but sometimes you can't help but feel helpless.
mm,
And I'm pretty sure the same applies for everybody. including the Burmese diaspora, like even those of us here in Taiwan seeking asylum and having stayed here to living in exile. So yeah, in a way, I guess what motivates me to write is that I just want to reach out to people and kind of just say, hey, like it's okay, like I know it's a tough time for all of us, and I believe that words hold power, and especially when you phrase it in a way that just hits you in the feels. So that kind of effect is what I'm going for my own sake, and of course for people who could maybe feel better in a sense, I guess, after reading my poems.
Right. Exactly. It's a form of, sounds like a form of connection, an attempt to um, express the thing that you're experiencing, because it might be that other people are experiencing similar things. And it sounds like it helps you to stay connected, stay grounded. Um, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a poem that you posted on June 11th, 2021.
Yes.
So it is mass arrests, mass abuse, mass abductions, yet they fail to seize what lies at the heart of the revolution. The spirit of the people remains unbreakable. Do you still feel that the spirit of the people remains unbreakable?
Yes, of course, definitely.
Such a beautiful
Yes.
poem.
Thank you.
What gives you hope? What, if you're seeing these things transpire on a regular basis? What keeps you going? What keeps you motivated? What are the things that makes up sort of the heart of the revolution or the spirit of the people to you?
I think because of course, Myanmar has been like way before the February coup. Myanmar has always been like not stable, I guess, like because like we're all familiar with life under dictatorship. And when the February coup broke out, maybe like I guess like a few months in, the regime started cracking down as usual, on activists, on protesters, especially on poets. And it always, it's just beyond me. It just baffles me that, how insecure do you have to be to go
Right.
after poets?
Right.
Because in a way, I feel like personally, I feel like poets are like the backbone of Burmese society. I read plenty of Burmese poems as well, and there was a time when news broke out that uh, one of like I would say prominent poets was shot in the head for sharing, I guess, writing a poem on Facebook that just kind of resonated with what the people felt. And I believe, I'm not sure of the details, but I believe he was gunned down, and that was kind of like the tipping point for me. Of course, like in the past, the regime, like the previous regime, did like organize, like crack down on poets and writers and authors, and they would imprison them for like a maximum of 10 years. So I mean, this dictatorship is truly horrific, just on another level than like all the previous dictatorships, like maybe during the time of General Ne Win or Than Shui. It's just worse because it's like our freedom to do anything basically has been stripped away, like our voice as well. And I guess in a way, I also want to pay an homage to the fallen poets and all the poets who are still in hiding in Myanmar and writing poems, to give us hope. I feel like that is such, to me, it's a brave thing to do.
Yes. Yes. Yes, 100%. That is, as you said, this military junta targets poets. It targets the sort of lifeblood or the thought and the feeling and the spirit leadership of the people in an attempt to I think cow the resistance, to kind of scare them. And it's been very inspiring to see continued expressions, continued writing, continued resistance over time, and even over a year and a half on. At least from my observations, it still seems like there's plenty of fight left in the resistance and the revolution. Um, yeah. So, do you have any poets that you like to read? Any particular posters who you feel are worthy of a follow or worthy of just checking out at all?
Um, that's an interesting question because even though I'm aware that there are many poets in Myanmar who's like, like revolutionary poetry, but as far as I know, I've yet to see an Instagram account, like a poetry account that focuses primarily on the Spring Revolution. Of course,
Mm,
like there are some, just poetry in Burmese language, but
mm,
it's not really about like revolutionary poetry.
mm. Right,
Yes.
right. That makes sense. Um, and how that's a great thing for me to think about. I'd never thought of before. What would you say is revolutionary poetry? What does revolutionary poetry do?
Mm, revolutionary poetry, I guess I would define it as poetry that stirs the hearts of the people.
Mm,
I would say that, like, um, of course, there has been many forms of revolutionary poetry in the past as well. Like for instance, William Blake's The French Revolution, for example. He was a prominent English poet, and the French Revolution, of course, as the name implies, was about the French Revolution. And
mm,
sometimes you see these interesting parallels between revolutions in the West, elsewhere, and revolution in Myanmar.
mm,
Because, in the end, that's freedom is what we all want. Freedom from fear,
mm,
freedom to do whatever you want, basically, just basic human rights.
mhm. Right. And so it's like a common struggle towards freedom,
Yes.
common struggle away from oppression and repression. Um, how so? How do you make sense of what's actually happening in Myanmar? How do you make sense of, on a personal level, the freedoms that were starting to be enjoyed within the country, and then the sudden clampdown of that on February 1st? How do you make sense from your perspective?
Um, Actually, I don't think anyone expected that something like this would happen in this
Hmm.
um, day and age.
Right.
Like, I guess for starters, like I said, I was born in I was raised in Yangon, so like
Hmm.
even before the February coup, I guess before like Myanmar was opening up to the world, there
Hmm.
was like still like the previous like regime under General Than Shwe.
Hmm.
So I distinctly remember like during General Than Shwe's regime, like the previous dictator, when like power cuts and blackouts were far too common,
Hmm.
and the sound of generators would like bust through the night until the next
Hmm.
morning. And I remember how me, my aunt, and like little sister had to queue several times for clean drinking water
Hmm.
and cooking oil during the aftermath of Cyclone Nargis in
Hmm.
2008.
Hmm.
And speaking of Cyclone Nargis, it was during that time that I realized everything I'd experienced up until that point was not the norm. It wasn't normal to not be able to do homework because there was no lighting. And
Yeah.
and truth be told, it was during that time that I began to develop an interest in writing and in poetry
Mm.
in general, because there's no electricity. There was
Yeah.
nothing you could do but wait and wait until all the lights flicker back on again. So
Right.
during Cyclone Nargis, it was a time that really shed light on my view of the country I lived in. Like when the disaster happened, like basic necessities and medical supplies were really scarce. As far as I remember, it was
Mm.
because the previous regime blocked all international humanitarian aid.
Mm.
When it happened, it was just an absolute nightmare. Like we had to stay awake for several nights because the roof kept leaking water and like kept shaking violently because of the winds, and
Mm.
it was just flooding everywhere, especially in Yangon and in Pathane.
Mm.
And I heard of far worse cases in Pathane where the delta was just littered with bodies
Mm.
because of the incompetence of the regime. And then
Right.
soon after, there was like a rise in cases of dengue fever, and
Mm.
children especially were very vulnerable. So like it was during that time, that I can just remember vividly, that this is all, it's like we're thrown back into the past once again. We're back to
Mm.
where we started from. Like it's, like the fact that we're living in some sort of a medieval age,
Mm.
and how the country is slowly becoming a backward country because of one delusional man. So in a
Right.
sense, all of this experience is uh, like connected, I guess. So it's not
Mm.
new,
Mm.
but it's just the feeling now in present day is just fresh and raw,
Mm.
because it's time for the regime to go. And
Right.
you know and I'm especially very proud of people who support the CDM movement, especially people like PDF, resistance fighters in the jungles.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
it's just, I feel like Myanmar is entering a new phase, or I would say journey, because this isn't unlike during the 88 uprising, or like the 2007 Saffron Revolution. This is
Mm.
entirely new. And, even though it seems like the situation is hopeless, I still do feel like a vestige of hope, because this
Mm.
time we're actually fighting back.
Right. Right. And it's always darkest before the dawn. Um,
Yes.
and also I think you're right that sort of aspect of fighting back. In my very short reading of the country, again from an outsider's perspective, it definitely seems like a different spirit has kind of possessed the people, and there is an understanding. I wonder uh, if you could recall what it was like after some of the reforms started to take place. Was there more opening up? Was there more hope in the country? What was that time like up until the coup happened?
Um, so, like I previously mentioned, I left Myanmar for Thailand when I was 16, 17. So
Mm.
I think that was shortly before the country was opening up to democracy, and elections, like fair
Mm.
elections, were being held again.
Mm.
So my experience would be, because I didn't really get to grow up during that brief, like democratic phase
Right.
in Myanmar. So I grew up, like I said, under the previous regime. And it's also kind of funny because my mother was there protesting on the streets near
mm,
Sule Pagoda during the 88 Rising.
mm,
My grandfather was there during the I'm not sure if this is not widely known, but like the anti-Chinese riots, like in
mm,
1967, I believe, which
mm,
was instigated by General Ne Win's regime.
mm,
So I think I speak for all Myanmar nationals and those of us like the Burmese diaspora that we have this collective like generational trauma that still persists to this day.
mm,
And I do not want that for my children
mm,
or grandchildren to
mm,
bear the same weight that me, my parents, and grandparents bear. Because
mm,
I don't want them to live in exile forever and forget about their identity in a sense.
mm,
So the regime that I grew up in, like I said, like the blackouts were far too often,
mm,
and there were also like mandatory curfews and like martial law. And I
mm,
also remembered like a gathering of 5 or 6 people in cities like Yangon was like strictly prohibited. I mean, this was
mm,
the previous regime.
mm,
So
mhm,
of course I mean, and during that time was like maybe like mid 2010s. So it wasn't like it, like I said, even though the rest of the world was like developing and evolving, you know, internet was very rare in
mm,
Myanmar. Like there were internet cafes, like people could, chat on Facebook, play video games and all that stuff, but the internet
mm.
speed was just horrible,
Sure.
so we didn't really have access to information or facts. And I didn't realize it back then, but propaganda as well was like very prevalent, I guess, because like whenever I grew up like reading newspapers, Burmese newspapers, and watching MRTV, which is like the
Mm,
state-owned like propaganda channel. Because back in those days, I didn't really know that this was a propaganda channel. Like
mm,
everything, in a way, the regime was just brainwashing people,
right.
through MRTV, because that was, as far as I remember, that was the only channel on like on television.
Yeah.
We didn't have like international channels or like international news channels, because MRTV and like I believe another channel as well. It was all that we could watch. So in a way, the people were very. I mean, we grew up very like controlled, in a
Mm,
sense. Like even though on the surface everything was like normal, but deep down that was the kind of life that we had to, yeah, that we had to grow up on.
yeah. And I wonder some of those things that you had said earlier about your mom being a devout Buddhist and you being growing up Buddhist. I see some of those themes in your poems, which I thought was very beautiful. Um, and I wonder how. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this as a
Yes.
question. How the sort of the the claims of sort of Buddhist identity or Bamar identity and Buddhism and protecting that identity and protecting Buddhism made by the military junta. I wonder how that squares with someone who is an active practitioner. Um, Again, I'm not Buddhist. I don't know much
Yes.
about that, but I wonder how that squares or doesn't square. Like from your point of view, what would be a more true version or reading of that?
um I guess from personal experience, because now like under this dictator's regime, like religion is being used as a tactic to kind of like promote their propaganda. But I'm
Mm,
just speaking from personal experience. Like I don't know if this is true, but back in my days, like religion wasn't really like used as
mm,
as a propagandist tool, I would say, because Myanmar, of course, is a predominantly Buddhist country, like a Theravada Buddhist country. Of course, there are many, how do I phrase this, like minorities, I would say, like Hindu minorities, Muslim minorities, and which is also like another problem, because back in the days we all thought that everyone, like every religion was like coexisting together, but it wasn't really the case, as in the Rohingya genocide. So like back to Buddhism, I would say, yeah, I mean, life back then was just different, like maybe I dare say a lot better than the current regime, because you really had the freedom to worship or practice, well, whatever you believe in. And like I said, like my family and I grew up in a very conservative family, very Buddhist, like very religious. Like we would go to the Shwedagon Pagoda as well, like every Sunday. So in a way, I guess we kind of coped with um, the life under dictatorship through religion, because for me, Buddhism is all about nonviolence, all about peace and compassion, upholding the five precepts, paying refuge in the triple gem, like the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So yeah, but as far as I recall, like the previous regime didn't really use religion as a propagandist tool. But of course, I'm pretty sure that persecutions elsewhere, especially in Rakhine State, were happening, because we don't usually get to hear those kind of things in newspapers or on the channel in Yangon. So yes.
And have you noticed a change generally within within things that people you're connected with? Have you noticed a change in awareness around what's happened in sort of the more border regions? And
yes,
what type of change? What's it felt like? What's it moving towards?
There is definitely a change, because if I have to be honest, when news of, like, I guess it was in 2017 when news of the Rohingya genocide started like getting mainstream, I remember what like most of us felt in Yangon was like, oh, like, the Muslims are the bad guys. Like they're the one trying to infiltrate into our society, or they're trying to preach their faith and trying to turn Myanmar into a predominantly Muslim state. That kind of propaganda. It was kind of very common and very usual. But now I think this has to do with that, like I said, that democratic phase that we experience. Like the internet started coming in, we started having like mobile networks, people started opening up, even like within the LGBT community. People just become more open-minded because of democracy. And it just changed, because it still baffles me how this current dictator can pull something like this in this day and age, especially in 2022, in the age of information. Because back then we don't know what, if this information is true or false. We just accept it as it is. But now we get to verify those facts. We get to see truth for what it is through social media, and through connections, through communications. So it's definitely different. And I would say I'm incredibly, I would say, yeah, I feel like, I've become more aware as well, more educated about the situation in my country, how people, like outside of Yangon, like in the north, like in Sagaing or in Kachin State or in Kayin State or in Rakhine State, for example, like people, like they have been suffering, like this kind, they've been experiencing this all their lives, and we don't know about this. And it's kind of heartwarming to see that everyone is, fighting for, inclusivity, and that we're not, like, when we're fighting this, we are reminding ourselves that we're not just fighting for Bamar people. We're fighting for I don't know, like for unity, I guess, because like I said, it has become clear that what we experienced in the past was all propaganda, and that in order for change to happen, we have to be more open minded and aware and put everything into the equation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if we'll come back to reality in just a second, but if you were to be able to like wave a magic wand, what would unity look like to you? What do you think that sort of bright shining star in the future would end up looking like or being for Myanmar?
That's a very great question. I would say if I have a magic wand, I would perhaps go back in time before General Aung San's assassination. General Aung San is Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's father, who was like a prominent figure, like the father of the nation. Because before he was assassinated, Myanmar was actually, transitioning into a more inclusive state, I would say. But the coup happened, that the coup instigated by General Ne Win happened. And I think starting from that point, the country just started spiraling down, just started devolving into the state that we see today. So, and I'm not I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I've heard stories from my parents and my grandparents that Myanmar truly was I would say, very developed country, like before the 60s. Like it was one of the most economically successful nations in Southeast Asia. Like we exported a lot of like rice, and like our country was abundant in natural resources. Everything was just going well. I mean, even like there was how would I say, like a diplomat from Myanmar who was like the Secretary of State of the United Nations. And so, yeah, I mean, back in the days, I guess it has also to do something with the country being colonized by Britain before. But yeah, after that point in time, things just started. Yeah, everything else just becomes a nightmare, essentially.
Yeah, a downward spiral, if you will.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, every well has a bottom. And
Yes.
the bottom is oftentimes the best place to push off of, so you can go back up to the surface. And so, so if you could, again, I think that was a great, pointing to what was there before, what is actually possible, what actually had developed at one point in time until it was sort of taken away by that coup in the I think it was the 60s, you said. And so in the future, what might that look like? I mean, is there unity? Is there sort of togetherness, or what sort of comes out of this? You don't want to look too far into the future. You want to stay firmly rooted in the present and firmly rooted in the situation we find ourselves in. But also, I do wonder what sort of is the motivating vision. What is the thing that kind of you feel brings people forward and makes people feel hope?
I mean, first of all, just a disclaimer. Like, I'm not an expert on politics in general,
Sure,
but
sure.
speaking from personal experience, I would say a united Myanmar is a country where we just accept people for who they are, because like it also has to do with the regime's propaganda that pitting like ethnic groups against each other, that there's always this like narrative that they're the bad guys and we're the good guys. And I think in order to have a truly united Myanmar, a truly united country, we really have to eliminate those preconceived ideas, that there's no good or bad. It's just that we're fighting for change, and if we truly want to see change, we have to accept everyone for who they are. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I guess that's what the National Unity Government, the NUG, envisions. And so far, like as far as I know, everyone agrees with this. Like like to see a united country without like all this like internal conflict, because I just learned like maybe a couple days before that, like Myanmar has like one of the longest ongoing civil wars in the world, and this goes way back, like I think even before General Aung San, like before the 60s. So like going back to what I previously said, like people from, like many ethnic groups outside of like the central part of Myanmar, they've been fighting for independence and inclusion all their lives. So yeah, in order to see a united country, we really have to, um, put those ideas on the table and take everything into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an acceptance, an opening, and hopefully a being present with the other, being present with someone who is not exactly like you, but is also very much like you.
Yes.
At the end of the day, yeah, absolutely. Um, so I was wondering, sort of in that vein of hope, but also in the vein of struggle and change, if you had any poems that you would like to read.
Yes. So I wrote a poem back in April 20. I got inspired. This poem is inspired by a CDM teacher, I think in I guess in Kachin State. She's wearing a red shirt with a quote that says, "What is coming is better than what is gone." And like part of my poetry is that I tend to get inspired from like real events and real tragedies, and I turn them into like my art. So this is what I wrote. Um, there is no hope without change, no change without great sacrifice. Blood, sweat, and tears we have shed for a new, just world ahead. Rebellions are built on hope. What is coming will be better than what is gone. So this is one of the poems, and
Beautiful,
I
beautiful.
guess
That speaks.
another yes.
I was just going to say that speaks so well to exactly the thing that we were just talking about. That's gorgeous. And yeah, and go ahead, please.
Yes.
Another.
So then the last one would be, this was in February 6th. Um, this was one of the regime soldiers shot a student from ABFSU, which stands for All Burma Federation of Student Unions. Um, he was shot to death for merely holding anti-dictatorship banners near Inya Lake in Yangon. And this is what I wrote. Yet another life taken for an act as harmless as holding a campaign banner. Where in the world can you witness such inhumanity? How in the world can we let this tyranny run free? So this is what I wrote.
Thank you. Thank you. That again, that speaks to that sort of focus and purposeful action. How do you feel you connect to the action, if you will? How do you feel? What do you feel your role is?
I guess for me, everyone who is a Myanmar national, even those of us, who are seeking asylum elsewhere or living abroad in the comfort of our homes, I think for me at least, I am completely aware of my privilege. I have a roof above my head. I don't have to worry about breakfast or lunch, you know. So I feel like it's a civic responsibility for me to speak out because I have a voice. I have a voice, and many of us in Myanmar don't. They're being silenced. And I just have this duty that I have to speak out no matter what. I have to sacrifice my time and energy and put as much effort as I can into the revolution. So my role um, is, of course, spreading awareness. That's number one. The second thing, like I said, um, I try to kind of like ensure that people, especially like the world and the international community, don't abandon us, because I feel like the world has completely shut us out and left us to fend for ourselves. And in a way, my role would be kind of like reaching out and just letting people know that, just please don't give up on us. I know like the news, like what's happening in Myanmar has kind of like lost momentum in like international news. So that's what I hope for, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Sai. I appreciate your words. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate that role that you're playing. I do think it's important. I do think it's, exactly what you said is spot on for what someone in your position can do, and you are doing the thing. And I hope you continue. I am now following you on Instagram, so I'm going to keep looking out for those words of inspiration, and keep looking out for that beacon of hope that propels us forward.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else? Are there any other projects, or is there anywhere that you want to direct people's attention? If anyone listening can go and do something or connect with you in some way, where can they go?
I don't really have like big plans because my focus right now is on writing poetry. Of course, I'm also helping the movement in Myanmar many ways, like making regular donations to PDF and doing the click to donate. And so for projects, like I mentioned, I love writing, so I've been writing. I would say a collection of fictional dystopian stories that is heavily inspired by the revolution and by everything that's happening in Myanmar. They're still in an early phase, but once the quality of the content reaches my expectations, then I have plans to kind of find a way to get it out, and hopefully, if I receive any monetary support, I'm going to donate every cent to this cause. Because if you're a true Myanmar national who loves your country and wants to see this regime crumble to dust, that's what you would do. So that's what I've been working on.
Perfect. And if someone wanted to find you on Instagram, what is your Instagram handle?
My Instagram account the poetry account is In the Land of Gold and Grief.
Perfect. Well, Sai, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it. Best of luck in your future endeavors. Again, continue writing. We need you. Everyone needs you. So thankful that you're doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I would just like to say something.
Yeah.
Is that I really appreciate like the team's effort, like your team's effort. I've actually been following Inside Myanmar for maybe like way before the coup.
Oh yeah.
Like, because you guys focus on bringing awareness on like Buddhism and like insight meditation, and in a sense you guys really inspire my practice as well. So that's what I want to say before we end.
After today's discussion, it should be clear to everyone just how dire the current situation is in Myanmar. We're doing our best to shine a light on the ongoing crisis, and we thank you for taking the time to listen. If you found today's talk of value, please consider passing it along to friends in your network. And please also consider letting them know that there is now a way to give that supports the most vulnerable, and to those who are especially impacted by the military's organized state terror. Any donations given to our nonprofit mission, Better Burma, will go to the vulnerable communities being impacted by the coup. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause in both websites except credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Oba yarananda dayananga yaranaya dayanam boda yaranamano